everything else. We have had a number of meetings with people in the community to kind of gauge where they are. We've had some meetings with individuals who are subject matter experts. We expect to have more of those. We are supposed to bring our charge to conclusion by December the 31st. I'm not really sure that we'll be able to get everything done by then. We may have to ask for an extension so that we can talk to everybody we think needs to be talked to. But we really, really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to get your perspective on the things that we are charged with doing. So I'm going to open up the meeting at this juncture with a call to order. Hey, Rob, come on.
How you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you? I'll wait for a minute because two of my committee members just got.
Where'd you?
They're over here.
Come over. I got a sign seating.
That's you. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, you?
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah.
Your timing couldn't be much better.
These people settle fast.
I had to wait on the judge, that's why.
Okay.
Your Honor, how are you?
I'm good. So I think it would be appropriate, we're gonna have a call to order, and so you get a chance to put a name. Hi, how are you doing?
I apologize, I just got out of a draft.
Your timing couldn't be much better. Okay, so you get a chance to put a face with the name, and if you don't know all of us, we get a chance to do that now. So your name, if you call the roll, please.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Judge Adrian.
Here.
Ms. Yarham.
Here.
Ms. Gibbons.
Here.
Mr. Cross.
Here.
Judge McClellan.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. We commence these proceedings with an opportunity for public comment. And so we will adhere to that. Is anyone requested to make public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Ms. Nikita, is it Stange? Stange?
Yeah.
You come up here. And just as a reminder, also, public comment is limited to 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep it short. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all. My name is Nikita Stang, and I am from CASA of Cuyahoga County. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. We recruit, train, and support volunteers who work with children in foster care. These are everyday people who donate their time to ensure that children in care have a voice in court. Many children cycle through multiple foster homes and schools, repeatedly encountering new teachers, social workers, and others unknown to them. They may feel confused, frightened, and angry. Long-term, these youth are less likely to graduate from high school, are more likely to experience homelessness, unemployment, incarceration, and trafficking. While other professionals on the case are strapped for time, like judges, and social workers and guardian ad litems, our CASAs provide consistency in a child's life. Here in Cuyahoga County, 66% of children in care are Black, and 22 are biracial. So those numbers are staggering. It is an epidemic. With almost 1,300 children needing CASAs right now, we have nearly 100 volunteers, with just 10 just trained, myself included, and sworn in. I haven't gotten a case yet, but we can use many more. Our volunteers go through extensive training, and they're background checked and interviewed to ensure they are a good fit for our program. They are then assigned to a case. Cases may be just one child or a sibling. The CASA is part of the case, just like the GAL or the jurist. They have access to all the information related to the children. They work with teachers, social workers, the GAL, mental health clinicians, among others, to ensure the child is receiving all necessary resources. They then compile all of this in a court report and submit it to the court for the jurist. I appreciate your time and I look forward to the opportunity to partner and bring more justice and advocacy to our youth in Cuyahoga County. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, we do have one more, Ms. Leah Winsworth.
Good.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee, and our honorable members of the bench who are here today. My name is Leah Winsberg. I'm with the Cuyahoga County Public Defender's Office. I've spoken with you all at several of your meetings, and just wanted to follow up from the last public comment that I provided. We have since submitted our recommendations and perspectives from the Public Defender's Office as of November 13th. And wanted to just extend myself to members of this subcommittee if there are any questions, thoughts, or discussion with respect to what we provided. We framed it around the JDAI framework, which this court is a proud member of the JDAI network, and hope that that would provide not only an easy framework to think through recommendations, but also tangible opportunities that already exist within the court to start implementing and looking at some alternatives for tangible changes that can make a difference on racial disparities, front end, as well as in the deep ends of the system. So I just wanted to extend myself for that opportunity, and please reach out to our office if we can be of assistance or provide any other insight with respect to these recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think before we plunge in and accept the minutes, I wanted to ask the court if it wanted to say anything in front, or whether we would just flow. It's up to you guys. Flow.
Yeah.
Okay. Good enough. Okay. That being the case, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
Second that.
It's been probably moved and seconded. Is there any readiness on the motion? Is there any readiness on the motion? Is there any readiness on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I wanted to have a brief discussion about the format of the final report. And Bridget, I know that you've been working on that. You can speak to it just a little bit.
So we, right now we're pulling together, we've been managing every single letter that public comment has provided, every resource that has been sent to us by the public. We are working with the county team to help us. We'll have those available on links on the county's website. Our final report is something that we're drafting and working on based on the meetings we've had so far. We are going to basically break it down by this meeting, this meeting, this meeting. These are the topics. These are the issues that were raised. Provide hyperlinks in the report, so it's very easy for folks to see what the references are for those that provided public comment. And then at the tail end of that, we'll have recommendations from our group. So I do not think that we're going to make it by the end of December based on some major projects that we're working on. And we still wanted to get youth voice and family voice to the table on this. And we're going to work really hard to protect the privacy of those folks. So we're still mulling through on our group on how we're going to do that. But we should have the report, I'm thinking January, at the latest February is the goal for recommendations from our group.
Given the nature of things, I was looking at the first quarter next year. Hopefully no later than February, but certainly before the end of the first quarter next year. Depends on what we're able to do. Any other concerns about the format of the report? No. Okay. Okay, so we want to get to the heart of the matter, which is really just to open this up for discussion with those of you who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis. I want to ask Judge Thomas O'Malley, as the administrative judge, if he is okay with us having some conversation with some of your staff. Just general conversation, just because it's been my experience in doing this work a long time that a lot of times that you get the best information from the folks that are absolutely on the ground doing the work. And so if that's okay with you, we're talking about, trying to at least make that opportunity available to folks that might want to talk to us and kind of, pushing it through, Bridget, so that they could get to us, for one of the sessions that we want to have. But before I even broach that, I want to clear it with you.
Sure, do you know who you have in
Yeah, what
mind?
kind of staff, like,
Probation
oh,
and people that are from dealing with firsthand the youth that are involved in youth justice system, diversion
CBIC,
specialists,
probation.
therapists, just kind of polling representatives from different departments that are doing the work on the ground.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, as long as you don't get into obviously names and specifics.
Right.
As long as you say nice things about me, I.
That's it.
How can they not?
Our goal is just to learn a little bit more about what's working well, and then are there gaps,
Yeah.
are there things they're seeing all the time that we could help plug those holes, so.
Sure.
Great.
No objection to that.
Yeah.
Okay, because, I really believe that, a lot of times things don't bubble up and people have tweaks that they would like to see done, but that they don't feel that they have a forum to actually present those tweaks. And so this would just be an opportunity. So if that's okay with you, we'll work it out with you as to how to.
Sure. I would also ask that if you're gonna talk to the court staff, that you talk to the detention center staff as well.
Well, that was kind of
Part of it.
part of what we were thinking about.
Judge, if I could say something.
Mhm.
So my name is Marvin Cross. I'm a retired Cleveland police administrator. So one of the things that I brought up, me coming up through the ranks in the police department before I retired, the higher I got up in the ranks, the less I knew about what was going on the streets. When I was on the streets, I promise you I was pretty good. But I also recognize that the people that's out there doing the work every day, that's who we need to talk to. And so that's why I was respectfully, you
Sure.
brought up some of the people, those are the people that's gonna have the knowledge of what's going on day to day. Not to say that you don't know or we don't know, but it's a lot different. And you gotta be sitting there in that trial, you don't have time to be running down there talking to the children that's involved, so.
Are you
Just
gonna
because
be
he-
talking to the police? Like, I'm assuming you're gonna talk to the police about what they're seeing too?
Yeah.
Okay,
And just because he won't say it himself, but he is a very boots on the ground administrative judge. And when, like, our detention staff recently got great inspection thing, and he went down and there was pizza for all the everyone. He is, I mean, this is, I just
I get
want,
it.
just for you guys to understand what goes on here, and he won't say it himself.
I'm not
He is-
demeaning anybody that's in the administration, but I'm just saying, the higher you get
No,
up.
no, no, I just want
Yeah.
to,
Okay, I know you got
you
that.
guys want to
Where's
know
the
what it's like
pizza
here?
I thought of it.
He's never brought us pizza.
Anything for us for,
Thank you.
but you are gonna talk to the police?
We can, we didn't initially put that as our list, but I think that would be appropriate. We are
Yeah.
engaged with them with some small problem solving work that we're doing right now with them. So I think we have a couple that have some really good insights about some of the things that they're seeing that really could contribute to that. So
Yeah.
I can reach out and see if they'd be willing to offer up a couple of police officers out there.
And judge and the police officer, you're talking about the kind of cases they're seeing, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
I mean, the police, you wanna talk about line staff and seeing what's going on in the community. The police are the primary, I mean, people who are being called to the houses midnight, you should definitely be talking to the police because they're gonna tell you what they're seeing.
I had not, Judge, I just called a judge, I have not had a chance to tell the committee that, I had brought up in one of our meetings about law enforcement
Yeah,
and some of the things that they're doing to help us, and I just called a judge because I found out yesterday that, the FBI would like to come and speak to us about some things that they're doing, outreach things that they're doing to try to help too. So, if the group give them permission,
mhm,
our next meeting, that they would be willing to come and speak to us.
yeah,
See, our charge is basically to provide to county council, advice about how they can assist you.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the upshot of what we're doing. And so I'm interested in the interfaces more so than, you know, what they're seeing when they go out to a home. They can, if they can present to us how that interfaces with how things happen when they come to the court, then that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in thinking about this meeting, I will say prevention is a huge issue. And I think police would have a lot to say about how do we avoid the court altogether? I mean, I really do. You know, the police have to make a choice. Are they gonna bring something to the prosecutor's office? Or are they gonna take it right to the treatment community? And I do think that they would have something, I think that would be an important, and they have been an important collaborator with us when we are trying to make changes.
And Judge, along those lines, what Judge Sweeney just said too, is the fact that with law enforcement, the boots on the ground, and what when you indicated, what could county council give us to help or give the court system to help? And when we talk about the social services that go along with it, I mean, a lot of the time our law enforcement are asked to be social workers on the scene. And I don't think anybody would disagree that they need more funding to even, do that. So I think that might be a good perspective to say that if there was more social funding from the county regarding some of our other therapeutic centers that we could take them to instead of juvenile court, that might be a good thing to hear.
And along those lines, I mean, as you know, courts are reactionary. We don't get involved until after the youth has been arrested or detained by the police. And I really feel that where the disconnect is if you talk to the police, they're gonna say, well, juvenile court doesn't take anybody. We're not gonna take you down there. They won't take you anyway. Or we have a lot going on. We have 180 beds. We got 40 in there charged with homicide. So we have to be a little discretionary as to who we take. It's that group that are the stone in the shoe to the neighbors, all the way up to the ones that we take at the door. It's that, and there's a large group of kids that the police bring to us that we simply can't take. We're not going to put somebody in there charged with a misdemeanor with a bunch of kids with homicide. So we have this group of kids that the court and CFS, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
They want us to take them. They don't belong in the detention center, yet we give them back to Children and Family Services. They take them to Jane Edna, and then they blame us because we won't take them. So there's that area or that group of kids. So if you talk to the police, I agree, the police have to be involved in your conversation because they're the ones that are dealing with this every day.
Yeah, I'm painfully aware of how difficult these decisions are. I don't know if all of you saw, but I saw an article in Cleveland.com yesterday about one particular kid who is just an abomination based upon what he has done. And as a result, he has put himself in a position where even though he's been given the opportunity to have a lot of services, he's chosen not to avail himself of those and has done some really abominable things.
Just to interject, that specific youth is on my docket. And I would just question everything you see in the media because what is being broadly said is that youth, and I'm not going to talk about any active case that I have, but that youth, I can talk prior. What is being said in the media is that he's been arrested 25 times. Per Cleveland police records, he's been arrested twice and never for a violent offense. So I would just preface it with that is that, and that youth is only 14 years old.
Okay, yeah, but the thing
he-
that was most, disturbing was that he's only 14 years old.
Yeah, and he's been involved in juvenile justice since he was 12. To explain how young a 12-year-old is, he lost a baby tooth once in my courtroom. That's how young this kid is. And he's only been arrested twice and never for a violent offense up until this most recent. And I don't know what his involvement is in that. But.
So where is the disconnect between what's reported and what's actually happening.
We don't know.
I mean.
We would love to know
That
that.
would be a meeting with the media that you would have to have. That, I think specific information was from, I don't know where they got their statistics. We actually, I think, are trying to find out because they're inaccurate and wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, they seldom get it right. In my courtroom, those 10 years, I wasn't the same case that was appearing in front of me
Mhm.
that I read in the paper.
Yes, and I have had that. I think we all. have.
Yeah, a lot of the times when we get hit on, from the media, we're all like, well, which case is it? We don't need, and then we find out it's a case that was in front of one of us. And we're like, well, that is not nearly what happened. So to judge to your point, yeah, we're second guessing sometimes because it's like a story that's being portrayed on the media that never really even happened in our courtroom.
But see, I wanna go back to what Judge Thomas O'Malley said, a little bit ago about the interventions. You know, I mean, the intervention, anything that we can come up with that will divert people out of the system is really a direction, if it's at all possible to safely do it, that I think that we should be trying to get to. Because I used to tell folks when I was on the bench that the only thing that people learn when they go to jail is how to be a better crook. And so why would I want to send somebody there if I didn't have to? So I think that that's where our mindset is. We want to give you the tools that are necessary to make it possible for people not ever to see you. You know, that would be an ideal situation for us. And if we can accomplish identifying what those resources might be to deal with prevention as opposed to intervention, then that certainly is the direction we want to go in.
And I think we've also talked about on the back end, like the reentry supports and is there a way we can sort of track what's available to these kids? Because we know they go back home and oftentimes the family system or there just aren't those supports. Teenagers are their greatest influence. So what else can we wrap around kids when they have a light touch with the court coming in through EIDC or something else? Or kids on the reentry side when they're going back, how can we really support and keep them kind of falling back into a pattern where, you know, for a lot of our kids, it's safety in their neighborhood, right? I connect with this peer group and so looking at sort of what we could wrap around to help kids maintain in their community.
And reentry from youth prison or from the detention center? I mean, we do have a reentry docket that I oversee and my magistrate does, and we work directly with ODYS.
So we kind of have to start talking about how do we help support kids going back home? So whether they're coming back from being in the detention center, whether we do have kids that come back from ODYS, right? We have a step down program for trauma and kids that are coming down. So what else do the families need or whoever sort of the support system is in the community to help? Is it workforce stuff? Is there some type of different job skills training and things that we can do to really help our kids maintain once they go back home?
I would give three answers for that. One is they need to have some kind of employment or a link to a school or a sense of their own future. And it needs to be concrete. The second thing is a lot of these kids need transportation. If I could give everybody a car, I'm not kidding though, I would do that. And the third, and candidly, for a lot of the boys, it would help if they had a positive male role model. And it would help if they had a positive male mentor. I mean, one of the things I think you see kids doing really well in a lot of residential treatment facilities, and that's because there are a lot of men around who are helping. And then when they go home, that disappears. And so those would be my three.
And the access to transportation, a lot of kids, especially in the reentry space, do not feel comfortable taking public transportation.
Yeah.
So it has to be a creative transportation solution, I would say. And I would also say, I don't know, just a more seamless transfer from a facility to the community is, I see a kid 2 weeks after they've been released from a residential facility or ODYS or another, and it's, well, we're waiting for this records and somebody has to call me back, and just a kid at home for weeks and weeks with nothing to do isn't a good situation.
So one of the things that I've learned being involved is I forget who gave us a list. They got a lot of support groups out there, and what we found out was they didn't have the funding they needed to really assist. I mean, it's some really good groups
Yeah,
that's out there and, you know, one group told us that they got $10,000 to take care of a whole year, which that's not really gonna
no.
do much. And then we also heard about, like counselors, they had all kind of positions, openings that not even filled. So the backdrop of that is that if we don't get these positions filled, I'm not saying why, just like police. Cleveland, 300 police officers short, so that's kind of telling you something. And so some kind of way we gotta get the interest out into the community that we feel some of these positions that are available and some of them already have the funding, but they can't cover.
Plus, I think that, one of the things that we asked Bridget, since she's on the inside already, to help us with was to try to, make some determination. I'm not gonna say to prioritize programs, but you guys have like over 100 programs, you know, that are out there. And I'm fairly certain that every program is not equal to every other program. There's gotta be some way to, identify the ones that you think really need more resources and some that probably need to go pedal their wares someplace else. You know, we gotta help you figure, or you help us to help you figure out how that happens so we can tell the people at county council, these are the priorities. Because having these vacancies open is just a recipe for, you know, failure.
Right, at one time, we used to have what they call shelter care beds, 40. And our budget from county council, I think, was 600,000. These beds average between and Bridget would know, I think $400 or $500 a day. And we put RFPs out, nobody responds. And that would be the group of kids that I was talking about earlier, shouldn't be in the detention center and shouldn't be at home. We have nowhere to put them. You know, they got the centers, but you know, that's limited number of kids that can go there. And it's, I don't know who, I'm not blaming anyone, but I mean, if the budget amount for shelter care was increased, the RFP, who knows, you know, and it's expensive. There's no question about it. But I don't know what the average cost is to keep someone in our detention center. I imagine that's $500 or $600 a day.
I think going to your point, I think that's why you should talk to line staff. I think probation and detention would be the people who honestly could give you the best sense of what works and what doesn't. And the other thing I would say is going on what Ann said, unfortunately, there's a lot of dead time in the system where kids are waiting for things to start. And I think that's another issue. Like, how do you, when a kid comes home from a residential placement or shelter care, if we could get that back, which I'm definitely in favor of that, or the detention center, they'll sit at home for a couple of weeks before services actually start. And that's a problem. It should start. You should go seamlessly from one to another.
Which speaks, I think, to the judge's point about
Yeah.
capacity. If you have
Right,
3 therapists where you used to have 8, your
right.
backlog is significant.
There's a lack of people responding to phone calls, referrals are being made by maybe probation officers and other people. And we'll set them for a review hearing, they come in, they say they've sent the referral over, they're not hearing back. You know, so there's a lot of that, and then obviously a lot of wait lists in terms of getting psychological evaluations, mental health evaluations in order to even get the services started.
I have a question. So, because I think we can certainly, I think what the media doesn't talk about is the success. You know, we have 3,400 youth who come through our system a year. And the only ones we tend to talk about are the really high-risk kids who've done something sort of enormous. What do you see as successful when things go well? And I know sometimes judges, you guys are mostly only dealing with the really high-level felony cases, but when you see things go well, what are system partners doing? What are POs doing or therapists doing that's working for those young people and their families?
I would say that, involvement, the CBIC Center, they're so involved from the jump, as I say, that, the success rate there is probably one of our highest. Probation, if we had more probation officers, I was a probation officer, if you have too many people on your caseload, you're not doing anybody any good. The ideal is 12 or 15 per caseload, and I think ours are like 28, 30, something like that, bodies. And I understand nobody, there's a little hesitation in the world today to work in law enforcement. Call it what you want, probation, detention center. We have postings all the time. We have 87 openings at the court. We can't fill them. And probation officers, I'm out every day. I see kids graduating from college. Hey, want to be a probation officer? And everybody's working from home, and it's, we're a competition that we can't compete with. But I really think it's the situation where the youth gets services right from the get-go, and that the CBIC people or the probation officers are very involved in their home life. And that's the other thing, is that one of the problems that we have, I've had kids walk into my courtroom. I'm like, how did you get here? Well, I walked. Where's your parents? I don't know. The family involvement through the faith-based community, I think they're the ones that send that message that somebody's got to get involved with these kids. If I didn't have anybody watching me when I came home from school, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I know that. But I really think that involvement, whether it's from the court or the community or the parents, I think they have to keep these kids on the right track, which I'm not saying anything nobody doesn't know.
That the male involvement, I know that got brought up earlier, and that I don't think people realize how important that is. I don't know, Judge Adrian and Judge McClellan, because of the age of your defendants, if you had this, but obviously we all as judges talk to the people in front of us. I'm sure Judge O'Malley, Tom's had this, being the other guy on the bench. There's so many times that a boy will say, you're the first guy that's really talked to me man to man in X amount of months. And it's eye-opening. I mean, I do know that when you talk to the rank and file of our staff, I hope that you ask them those questions too. Some of our, especially our men probation officers, because of that, the fact that they can relate to what a growing boy is going through is eye-opening to these guys. And we really, we see the mentorship program. Oftentimes from my chambers, I will look out my back window when the detention center's out, playing football and stuff, and just almost like the one-on-one coaching. I saw like one of our DH workers teaching a kid how to box the other day, and it was fascinating to see, and just how much that child then interacted with that worker because of that. So obviously an increase in staff from our probation department, especially to help serve as not only a probation officer, but a mentor, I think would be a huge thing for us.
Yeah, we would love if the six of you could put your heads together and kind of put together a wish list, a prioritized wish list of the things that you think would be most impactful. Because like I said, when I agreed to come on board here, my purpose was to try, like I said, to move the dial. There are things that we can do. There are things that we can't do, just by the nature of the fact that we are a unit of the legislative branch of the county government, trying to give advice about what should happen with the judicial branch. That's kind of like a non-starter constitutionally to start with. But if we can give advice, and that advice comes from the judicial branch to us, that we then can pass on to the legislative branch, that would be very useful. And there are some things that we might want to ask you, maybe we'll get to them today, maybe we won't, about things that have once again been reported, that we'd like to know what your take is on those things and how you've addressed issues that have arisen up in the public eye, but not necessarily your side. So we want to talk a little bit about those kinds of things too, but some of those are outside of our purview. So we're going to try to stick primarily with the things that are. Okay. So we we had a list of things, and I don't know if anybody wants to speak to some of the questions that we have developed.
So I think the judges sort of talked about, but maybe it'd be helpful because, you know, a lot of folks don't understand the complexity of carrying a caseload of young people who are attached to their family versus an adult carrying an adult caseload, right? So how does that look different if I'm a juvenile probation officer versus like a probation officer in adult system? Is it more complicated to work with young people? I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but I really.
And, it's because of the parents.
So can you,
Here,
Say more
I was a
about that?
probation officer, as I said. I was an
You were adult, right?
Adult
As
probation
was
officer. And they came to you. I mean, you had a report day, and they would commit file in one after another. Here, and Tim, who was a probation officer and the chief probation, he was in the probation department for 30 years, he would know this much better than I do. That there's certain amount of contacts that you have to have in the community. There's, it's just different, it's harder. And that's what we were seeing for a while, is that we would hire people as a probation officer, and they looked downtown. One, they were getting paid more money downtown, we even that out, but they were getting paid more money, and it was 10 times easier. So we were losing. So now we have, if you're gonna apply for a probation officer job, they're going downtown, they're not coming here because of the rules that we have. And I'll let, if you don't mind, Tim, I'll
Not at all.
dump it on you.
Yeah, it's so much more complex, right? So as a juvenile probation officer, you're dealing with parents, you're dealing with schools, you're dealing with mental health workers, you're dealing with children and family services, you're dealing with multiple systems, you know? And as what we tell our probation officers is if you want that kid to be successful, you have to deal with all those systems. That sometimes kids we dealt with or deal with on a daily basis, they might have 4 different case plans from all these different systems with 5 objectives on each one. And, you know, I couldn't do that with my family. You know, that's completely overwhelming. So, you know, one of the critical things that we need is we need systems and the community to work together to help our kids. We just can't view these kids like juvenile delinquents. These are court kids, court problems. Now, these are community kids, and it's the community's problem. And we have to work together. But it's such a more complex thing. Our probation officers go into the home. We tell them you're not going to understand that kid unless you're in his home. And I could spend the rest of the time telling about stories about home visits like that. One where I said to the kid and the parent, let me see his room. And I went upstairs on his room, and it was January, and there was no window. You know, there was just a blanket blowing, and there was snow on the kid's bed. You know, you have to see the home to understand the kid.
And Tim, along those lines, the overlap of as Tom mentioned, the overlap of the multiple cases, and Tim said the same thing. We have a portion of our case, or of our kids are on probation, was in a delinquency case, but they also have an abuse dependency, you know, or a parenting case over their heads too. These kids might not know, they're worried about their, you know, for lack of a better term, their criminal action, their delinquency action, but they really don't know where they might be waking up in a month from now and what foster family or what house. And the complexities of those and what our probation department then must go through to reach out to all these families, those never existed in the adult system when I was probation officer. You know, you would take the urine test, you would make sure that they got their job going, and that was it. But there's all these other levels, and unlike the adult system to a large degree, that those individuals, they control their destiny. These kids don't really have a chance to control their destiny. They are so dependent on all these other factors. And then our probation department and our services have to kind of thread that needle to bring all those services together.
One of the problems is that so much of the success of how a child is going to do is going to depend on the buy-in of the parents. Mm-hmm. But if the parents don't buy in, they don't really suffer a consequence. It's the kid that suffers the consequence. And that makes things 100 times harder because, you know, you're gonna end up, the kid is gonna suffer the consequence, but the parents are gonna make it work. And I would say that one of our most successful programs is MST, which is multi-systemic therapy, because it is geared directly towards changing the behavior of the parents. And the other thing I would say, going back to the issue about success, success is quiet. Right? That's how I would phrase it. Success is quiet. So it's a success if we don't hear about it. If we don't hear, and I think it's important to maintain that quiet because the kids and the parents should feel like they are the agent of their own success, not the court. Right? They create their own success and not the court. And the court, this is stigmatizing being here. So if you're getting your services from, we don't want to broadcast that. Because we're going to stigmatize, we're going to put an asterisk by their success. So it needs to be quiet. And it's funny because in the political, so you want to tout your successes, but I don't really want to tout my successes. And that's another complicating factor.
And I just want to, this is kind of going a little bit, but build on what you said about the adult system and the juvenile system, is some of the adult system has more supports than we had in our, in who we deal with. Like an example would be the Board of Developmental Disabilities has liaisons that work with people in the jail. We have competency issues all the time, and because it's family and we're talking about kids, it is more complicated. And we don't have that connection. The way, and this is not gonna be a scientific term, but it feels that there are some kids that, and I keep looking at Mark because I know that he works with children and family services, but it becomes like a hot potato of our kid, your kid, our kid, your kid. And the truth is, it is all of our kids. And I know Judge Sweeney and I got the chance to go to Minneapolis with people from the county and see how a system worked where mental health, their equivalent of the Board of Developmental Disabilities and the court, and their children and family services worked so collaboratively together, where it feels like we're both placing agencies, so it feels that it's the court or children and family services, but there's other people who should be more intricately at the table, at least from my vantage point.
I agree with that. There are, DD Adams Board, we're sort of, but it is, I've been on the bench now for 20 years and this is a period where I feel like agencies we're competing with each other or we're not, right? This moment in time, especially since COVID, I feel like a lot of things, people are being pitted against each other.
Is it competing or is it like war?
Yeah,
And what benefit do you see that being? I see stories all the time, like pitting agencies against one another. How do you think that's damaging the young people and vilifying one kid does something horrific and all the kids that come into contact with the youth justice system are swept into that? Do you see that as hurting the kids?
Absolutely.
Who's doing the pitting?
Well, it's hard to.
Money?
So, yeah.
I was gonna say that in Minneapolis, I would tell you that in Minneapolis, they all had the same boss and the same budget. All those entities, they weren't competing against each other for resources or people.
So I looked at the report that the governor's work group did. And I'm curious as to whether or not, after you guys had taken a look at it, if there were things that could be done at the local level, because that was kind of geared at the state legislature. But it seemed to me, especially in the area of alternate placement of youth with special needs and stepping up initiatives for mental health, that those kinds of things were things that, we might be able to talk to the county about doing. This thing that you're talking about now with regard to, trying to identify all folks that are all groups that have a similar mission and seeing if there's some way to combine that, again, is something that I think is worth talking about. We get into these turf wars and everybody's trying to protect their turf. I think that the goal for a group such as ours is to try to figure out how you can maybe use the power of the purse to kind of tear those walls down. And I'm not sure that it can be done because, you know, everybody, not only does everybody have the turf, but everybody has their ability to lean on somebody that's gonna help them keep that turf. So I mean, it becomes real difficult. But that would be something, maybe that model is just something that we need to bring to the attention of the county. So again, I'm building this cake for you to present to me, for me to present to the county council about what can they do to really make a difference.
And Judge, if I can say, so what you're talking about, so myself, I ran a task force in Cleveland. And I actually dealt with the competing groups. I don't want to say who they are, but they were all competing and battling. And Judge, you know, I brought this up before for our group. Sometimes it's the messenger. You can't get people together if you don't have the right messenger. So who it is, I don't know, but I know I put a group together that we dealt with a lot of law enforcement issues where everybody had their own little areas and fighting. And we had 13,000 felony warrants and we had people fighting all the way up to Washington about who's gonna catch them. And I was able to get everybody in the same room, just like what we're doing here. They didn't know that I was bringing them all together until they all sitting there looking at each other like idiots. And then it's like, okay, tell me which one of you guys gonna catch 13,000 felonies? If we could get these groups, whether hook or crook, get a man say, okay, which one of your group gonna solve all these problems by yourself? So some way, we gotta try to get these groups together, even if you gotta embarrass them. Just say, look, we're not getting it done. If you keep doing the same thing, we're gonna get the same results.
The
And
question is, you know,
how do we do it?
who has the juice to call the meeting?
Well, we called a meeting, and Bridget was part of it with the chiefs of police that we're currently trying to set up. I think it's set for the 19th of December.
I forget. Sorry.
Because it's, we here,
Mhm.
you know, I don't take them to juvenile court. They're not gonna take them. So we have the police that are mad, for lack of a better term, mad at us or disappointed that we won't admit this youth into the detention center. Yet our hands are kind of tied as to if we don't take them, where do we put them? Do we have funding to put them in shelter care? No. Do we have funding to put the, you know, and if they're in CFS custody, do they go to Jane Edna? You know, we release them to CFS and they turn around and look at us, well, they're just gonna go to Jane Edna and run. Well, I have my own set of problems. And they had, you know, if the child is in your, if that's where you choose to put them, so be it. But I think our meeting with the chiefs of police is a first step for us, as far as the judges are concerned, so that they truly understand how the process works. We've done it before. I can't remember how many years ago we sat down with them and said, look, here's our guidelines to get into the detention center. We didn't just pull these out of the air. We have to have some game plan here. Otherwise, we don't have enough beds. I mean, we could fill that thing, I could fill it by tonight. But that's not what we want to do. We want to keep them in the community. We don't want to put youth in the detention center that don't belong, but we have to get that message to the police. The other part of it is that Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus are bidding, and I don't know if you know, Bridget made you aware of the CCF, the Community Control Facility. And we've met with several people trying to figure out where the county's on board, where it's going to be 32 beds, and it's going to focus on gun violence. And gun violence in Cuyahoga County is like nowhere else in Ohio.
Right.
They can say Franklin County and Hamilton County are like Cuyahoga County, but we have statistics to dispute that. And I think that's a huge part of what we're dealing with. I would imagine that every case I have had, just about, there's a gun specification on it. Where they're getting them, I don't know. I ask, they don't tell me.
I will say just that I've met with kids at ODYS, Judge McDonough and I have, and sometimes we go there. And we've talked to kids before and they've told us that it's just as easy to get a gun on the streets as it is to get a pencil. I mean, everywhere, right? So.
Yeah, so we're, our hope, hope we get the CCF in Cuyahoga County, then we send fewer youth to Ohio Department of Youth Services, send them to what we will consider a treatment center right here at home where the families can get there, the families can participate and be part of it. So when they get out, because it's usually only 6 to 9 months, when they get out, that they have the resources and the knowledge, not only the youth, but the family does. So they're going through counseling with the kid, so that when they get home, they don't come back. We don't want them back. We have enough.
Got enough new business, you don't need the old business. What's the difference between the CCF and what was announced a couple of days ago, out in Bedford Heights?
The community control facility is, it's a state-funded facility run by the county. So I can't get an answer from Columbus whether county has to pay for it up front and then be reimbursed, or is the state gonna pay for it? They have 100 and
So.
some million to.
So we don't know the exact budget. We do know that, they're replacing Cuyahoga Hills, ODYS facility, and that's gonna cost around 125 million to rebuild that. So our proposal for 32 beds will be less than that, but we wanna build a facility that's focused on treatment. And as the judge said, keeping kids home so their families can be involved. And then when they're released, the first day home, the only thing that looks different is they're sleeping in their own bed and they have the services they need in place that first day.
I think to add to
And
that,
they could be linked to the same mental health provider that they had in the facility, that therapist comes with, instead of, oh, I'm gonna get out, and then 6 weeks later, I'm gonna get my meds again, and I'm gonna get my, a new therapist and get into school. All of that could be linked directly, and it's a continuation of therapy for like the family, for the youth. And the difference is it's more supposed to be therapeutic focused, as opposed to, I guess, ODYS. So there is therapy at
Yeah,
ODYS.
and what you saw in the media the other day was there's only 3 ODYS facilities. And so the commitments to the Ohio Department of Youth Services are run by statute, right? Like a sentencing. So when we send them there's only 3 facilities throughout the entire state of Ohio. They're trying to take those facilities, instead of having so many kids go to one facility, they're trying to break them up into smaller, more therapeutic type settings. And so that's the one that they had talked about in Bedford. So when we are committing kids to ODYS, that's more of, they could be going for the shortest amount of time they could go for 6 months. They could go all the way up until they're 21. Whereas the community correctional facilities, we do have a bunch of those throughout the state. And we, obviously, when we want to do that, we have our placement department send referrals. They evaluate these kids based on their age, their history with the court, what the facts are on their underlying case, their charges. There's a lot that goes into it. Sometimes they interview our kids, sometimes they don't. But it would be nice to have, and so those are usually 6 to 9 months, depending on, like, we place them on probation, they go there, and it takes them about 6 to 9 months to complete that program, and dependent how engaged they are with those services. It would be nice to have one locally, obviously, so that the parents can visit them, they can be more engaged in their family therapy in person, and then obviously have those community supports right here locally when they are released.
So I had a conversation with Chris Romaine, and he sounded as though he's all in to throw whatever weight he has behind getting that kind of a facility here. I know that, given the nature of things, that our political persuasion is the wrong color. But I think that all we're talking about is the best interests of our kids and the best interests of our community. So I'm hopeful. And in talking to Councilman Gallagher, he's all in too, to talk to people that he knows to try to get that done. Is there anybody else?
Well, Judge, along those lines, the good news is all 3 cities are bidding for it. All their political color is the wrong color. So that's a good thing. Going back to the one issue though about who can bring these people together. So back when I was in the House for all those years, the speaker would always tell us, you want to get state agencies on board, call the chairman of the finance committee. They'll make the agencies come to the table real fast. And I think that is a way that we could get these agencies together soon, right? We don't live in a vacuum. We know that the county has a budget that all these various agencies, have to take a piece of, but the county council, finance committee, as well as the county executive could force those meetings together, at least get us all to or I really can't be the judges, but get all those agencies to the table to make those changes happen.
And Chris Ronayne's office has been very involved. I mean,
Right.
we've met with him. We came up with 10 sites, 3 or 4, which I can see out of my window upstairs. And we're working on it. I believe it's due on January 3rd.
One thing that I want to express a note is, are they gonna include girls? So we have, 20 girls downstairs. And I don't think we have there's no facility at ODYS for girls. And, most of our treatment facilities, I mean, one of the things that we are doing, I just think it's worth pointing out, especially because we had Wingspan and we had multiple treatment providers with Beachbrook, Catholic Charities, Armadale, Believe Christian Home. We don't have any, those are all gone. And that's a complicated thing outside of the purview of this committee, but that has been a devastating loss. And they treated girls and they treated children, little children, and they treated severe mental health problems and addiction and substance abuse issues. And there's this whole level of like sort of medium, short-term residential that has just disappeared. And it's been devastating. So, we're either keeping kids on probation through multiple crimes, or we will, and I do think Wingspan and the Big Six need, that would be an important history of understanding some of how we got here. I mean, again, it may be outside of the purview of this, but.
I think to your point, they keep saying what happens. There used to be a lot more residential treatment facilities for youth, right? There were 18 to 20, really 25 years ago. But as residential's been hard to staff, insurance liability goes through the roof. I mean, I can't tell you how many iterations of offense we've had to build just for safety of like keeping kids safe from the community, right? And so the investment, the cost, having to staff something 24/7, as we have more complex kids staying longer, a lot of facilities close their door, and I think there's maybe 3 left for girls. I mean, obviously, we do have them, Belper, Applewood, and Ohio Guidestone, and then the centers is kind of rebuilding to be the 4th, but that's what's left for residential, and you can only take as many kids as you have beds that you're licensed for. So if you have 30 beds, and you have 30 kids in those beds from all over the state, kids are staying longer. They used to stay 2 to 4 months, now they're staying 6, 9, 12, right? And so then those beds are kind of offline for other kids to come in because the complexity of the kids, just like the complexity of kids you're seeing, there's just so much family and community violence and trauma that you can't even get through it in a short period of time. And so, as much as everybody's taking whoever they can, kids are staying longer and there's fewer beds available.
And if I could add to
Yeah.
that, so Applewood does take some of our more difficult kids, but as that capacity is shrunk and the need is still there, our kids are the first kids not to be accepted in residential facilities. Our kids come with sometimes serious cases, and residential facilities are hesitant to take a chance on our kids.
And the CCFs.
And CCFs, absolutely.
And so trauma, because I think we've kind of skirted at that a little bit, but how much do you think trauma is driving much of what you're seeing in your courtrooms?
A lot of it.
A lot of it.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
And you, Judge Jennifer O'Malley, have a docket that specializes in working with young girls and boys who've experienced trauma at the hands of adults, and how then does that tend to manifest in them becoming involved in our system? What does that look like from what you understand?
Yeah, so I oversee, and my magistrate hears the actual safe harbor docket, which is juveniles that are charged with a crime, but also either are victims of human trafficking or are at risk of that. So sometimes it's at the hands of family members, sometimes it's their parents. Sometimes it's just obviously like there's a big overlap with kids that are in agency custody. A lot of trauma. So a lot of those youth, every child that comes on our docket has a mentor, is linked up with counseling. And because of that, it has been very successful. It isn't always. There are sometimes youth that, they all get the same types of services. Sometimes they have to go to residential, but sometimes it's not successful and they end up having to go to ODYS. But I think every single child on that docket, as well as not on that docket that comes before us, has some sort of trauma, significant trauma in their life.
We're at 3:00 and, Usually we try to keep these meetings to an hour. This one is kind of special, so I just want to ask you if you're okay if we extend a little bit. We appreciate it, all the input that you've given us so far. If you are, we'll keep going for a minute.
Sure.
Probably should add, maybe I came in late, but we should really thank these judges. I know how tough it is to get an entire bench together.
Shout out to Mary Pat.
Yeah, I mean, seriously,
We did.
we had 34.
Tom promised me pizza, I didn't see it.
But I mean, it's, we appreciate it very much and realize that's a imposition, and thanks for hosting it.
Our pleasure.
Do you feel on that, sort of sticking on this topic of trauma and like, it makes me think sometimes, I heard somebody once say, there's a building on fire and we're blaming the young people for jumping out of the building, right? So it's sort of, I think about that a lot. Like, we're always surprised when young people who've had trauma and difficulty and, adverse childhood experiences and abuse and men raping them, abusing them, holding them captive, things of that nature. And we are just shocked when they're engaged in things. And then the system of juvenile court is oftentimes blamed. Do you feel like do you think as a community, we're doing what we need to address upstream when things are starting to show?
I think we could always do a better job of that. I think that the court, specifically like EIDC, has really tried, even since I've been involved in the court, to move things as upstream as possible.
Do you know what the EID, do we all know what that is?
No.
The early intervention.
The Early Intervention Diversion Center, which prevents any even official involvement and can screen a family or a kid for trauma or substance abuse to try to just lightest touch, get the child connected to a service provider. And if it doesn't have to be an official case, we divert how many cases a year?
It's
2,737.
And I think the statistic, and I believe it's 80 year out, 85% of those kids have not reoffended.
Right.
That is working and is a success story for us. I think as far as upstream, I remember we could only be more and more upstream, I would say. I think when you look at us with Columbus and with Hamilton County, Cleveland is like number 7 in poverty. I think that Columbus is like 27 or 47.
Yeah, when you look at total violent crime and poverty, Cleveland is usually 1, 2, top 5 always. But when you look at per capita violent crime, Cleveland is 7, and Columbus is usually 26, and Cincinnati might be in that area too. But it's not apples and oranges. In terms of per capita burglary, Cleveland's number 1, per capita murder, Cleveland's number 7, per capita rape, Cleveland's number 3, robbery 2nd, arson 6th, grand theft motor vehicle 9th. We are comparable to Detroit, Baltimore, Columbus, and Cincinnati are usually in the 40s or even lower. Cleveland's just
So in the interest of a wish list, and I want all the resources for juvenile, we all do, we love this court, and I hope that comes through. We really all are here because we love what we do. But something that I think people are like, how would you help youth violence? I would institute a universal pre-kindergarten. I would introduce universal preschool. Getting resources and into a child's life as early as possible, I think is one of the most beneficial things you could do.
Structure, mentors, right? Like, we have a lot of our kids that come into the detention center that we know have not been going to school, right? And some of them are old enough, obviously, to set an alarm and go to school. But sometimes the parents aren't doing anything to get them there. They're not doing anything to get them enrolled. They come in here and they're in the detention center, they're in a structured setting, or if they have to go to a residential, they do great. And I get so proud of them. And sometimes they graduate and they're earning more credits and they're engaged in pro-social activities. And that's great to see. Problem is when they go back to the community, right? There's a lack of structure. There's a lack of supports in the community. There's a lack of engagement in pro-social activities, mentors, people that they can contact, you know, if they need to get out of their house, things like that. So then they do great somewhere and then they get back into the community, and a lot of them sometimes are reoffending.
Being placed right back into the same circumstance that with with not a lot of support or different support. And if you don't have a supportive family, it's really hard for a kid to not be in a car with a gun.
You know, it's funny that you guys say that. So I grew up on 93rd and Woodland, 149th and Canson, 97 St. Clair, because we were too poor. We didn't have any, you know, my family didn't have a lot. I'm the first person in my family to own a home. So the structure part, the reason I was able to get over was because I was involved in sports, and we had recreation centers, we had PAL centers, we had after-school programs. All of those things are gone now.
Yep.
And so I'm involved in some different community groups that hearing this, I think that if we could get the community to actually hear what the judges are saying, because they're not hearing what you guys are saying, I'm telling you now. It's the first we heard of it. If they heard what you were saying, they would know, number one, that you really do care, because a lot of people think you don't care. And number two, there are some groups that would support, like some of the ministers. So I'm an advisor to a lot of the Black minister group. And they really don't know this. It would be good to bring some of these type of groups so they can hear it, the city rec centers. So it takes a village. It's not gonna be one area that's gonna do it. You know, you got the recreation centers that could assist. They got their own budget. County got their own budget. Once again, we're talking about bringing these groups together instead of everybody being on their own island, where everybody's not gonna agree, you know that, but I guarantee you, we can get enough of them because they see what's going on. And like I say, me being in this my 44th year in law enforcement, believe me, I know what you're talking about. I don't even want to hear about Cincinnati and Columbus trying to compete with us, because they can't. And that's a bad thing that we win it.
We're not.
Yeah, we're not winning
way.
in the right way.
Right.
But that is something that, and I'm pretty sure I could facilitate. I could get some groups to come. I guarantee you I could. I could get some
That would
groups
be
to come
great.
and listen to the
Great.
judges.
And no, go ahead.
Every kid that comes in front of me, when it's time for disposition, I ask them what they need for stuff. And I will say that majority of the boys that come in front of me, it's sports, right? And then I ask them who their favorite athlete is, who their favorite sports team is, and might make them write a paper on it. But a lot of them have never engaged in that type of activity because they don't have it, either through their school, they're not connected to a rec center. So I think that would be important because, you know, a lot of them love music. So I know there's programs out there for recording studios out in the community, but some sort of pro-social, sports in and of itself would be.
I was a direct
Let's do
security
this.
for the Cavaliers. I was for 16 years, I was a direct security for the Cavaliers. So I retired when we got the championship. I got my ring. I said,
You should sign back up now.
so I still have a lot of contacts with them, and just like, I just want to try to, I want to try to help put
Yeah.
this together.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I can do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think too, we've got some efforts coming up. I'm sorry, I keep jumping sort of on that side of the table, but we do have some efforts that are coming up that are intended to do just that. And everything that the judges are talking about is very similar to what we heard at our last one with Patrick McCarthy, and he shared about, you know, Baltimore is a city with similar issues. They're making their way through some of this. Cleveland is, I think, paying close attention to this as we've had reduction in violent crimes in the last year. There's been a pretty significant reduction. So they are doing something right. We're also coming out of COVID, right? So COVID was a trauma to everybody, and we were all in it together, and kids were hurt way more than anybody else, you know. All their safety net was just completely washed away. So of course, we're gonna have an uptick in violence because everything that kept them safe was pulled away. So we have been awarded the OJJDP Continuums of Care, which is just that, bringing people together to think about where are the gaps, who can fill them, what funding do we have over here that's not allocated correctly, how do we put it over here? So I think maybe you being part of that or bringing some of your people to that, I think could be helpful.
I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be some, and do you want to share about the because guns are a big issue, the BJA work that we're gonna be doing, the VIP Alliance.
Well, we just received a grant, with the general division, so we're gonna be looking at, kind of best practices to deal with all the gun violence we're seeing in the community. And so I believe the first year, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a planning year.
I think it's 6 to 9 months of planning. I
Yeah,
forget which.
and so we're gonna gather people from the community, from the systems to talk about what can we do to get guns out of the kids' hands.
Is that coordinated with Judge Sheehan's docket?
It is. It is.
And I think sometimes sometimes the most simple, and I heard you guys are gonna have youth involvement and a youth voice too. I think that that's really important in families because I think sometimes it's the simplest thing. We were at a conference and we saw this amazing facility that is in Chicago. And we are all the adults are all up here at the services and this connection and this, and then we had a kid who had been previously justice involved who was there. And we said, what was the most beneficial thing you saw? And he said, the washing machine and the dryer. Did you already know?
Showers. No, I didn't say that. No, you got it.
Like we were at the same conference. Every single adult around the table was like, oh my gosh, I mean.
Right? Or a lot of these kids have never received a certificate, right?
Yeah.
So when we graduate them from a docket, we do a celebration, we might bring in their favorite treat. They've never, some of them have never had like a birthday cake, right? So I mean, if I could do that for every kid on my docket, I happily would. I know that, Judge McDonough does it in reentry and we do it in Safe Harbor, and I'm sure some of the other ones do that too, but like that little token to them means so much more because they've never had it.
Sometimes that can work.
Yeah, congratulating them. I bound a kid over yesterday and I congratulated him for graduating high school and he was so appreciative and was so proud. It wasn't an easy decision, but at the same time, I had to acknowledge his strengths and how proud I was of him for doing that, right? Because a lot of the kids that come in front of us don't ever see that.
And I think bringing the different groups together, I've been here 18 years and I hung my head on the wall because I don't know how we get the message of what we do here at 9300 Quincy into the community. I had one very intelligent person that's involved in some of the things here, thought that the whole building was filled with kids. They had no idea that this was a courthouse so I mean, I don't think the general public understands. I mean, we are damned if we do, damned if we don't. We detain them, we're the bad guy, we let them go because we think we can take a chance and we want to rehabilitate them and they do something stupid and we're all over the news. And as Judge Sweeney said, the good is all quiet. The bad is the only time we're in the news. And I think if we could educate the public, and I don't know how we do that other than
I know how to do it.
piecemealing it and doing small groups.
I'm just telling you, if you guys got together and just came up with a date, because if you try to go and say, hey, give me a good date, if you judges came up with a date and said, look, on this date, and we can have some groups come to listen to just what we've been talking about. I mean, I know this is brand broadcast. I promise you, I can get you some key groups that could help kids all over to get people to get away from their little islands, that they would come here and be willing to listen. Now, is it gonna solve everything overnight? It didn't happen overnight, it's not gonna solve, but I know I can get these people to come. I guarantee you I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to give you an opportunity to address some things that have not been necessarily the most positive statements that have been made publicly by people who allegedly know something and may not know anything. But I want to hear from you how you have dealt with the two hot button issues that I know people that saw us appointed thought that we would address. I don't think that we necessarily have the ability to address them, but I want you to address them anyhow so we can at least say that we raised it with you. The first is the issue having to do with the assignment of indigent counsel and how that was played out in the press. And I know that there have been some steps that have been taken by the court since, that broke to at least adjust how that is carried out. And I just want to put it out there in front of you so that you guys can speak on it.
Okay, so, before Judges McDonough and Judge Celebrezzi took the bench was when Judge Corrigan and Judge Ryan were leaving. I had a meeting with Colin Sweeney about the assignment. And that he felt, and the statistics showed that, we weren't doing exactly what the general division was doing, which means the public defender gets every odd number, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So then we started 1, 3, 5, 7. And now I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, every other case, if you will, goes to the public defender's office. Unless, you know, Junior or whoever gets arrested on an odd number case, his lawyer last month happened to have an even number case. So we try to make it consistent that way.
And they're conflicted out, so kids commit crimes in groups, so there's a lot of conflict. And the other area of conflict is the abuse, neglect, dependency docket. The PD's office represents almost they're all involved in all, so that is also an area of conflict. So, so we have met with the state public defender's office
Yes.
on that last summer. And she seems satisfied with that.
Right, and we're scheduled to have another follow-up meeting.
Yeah.
We had one set, but then she went out of town.
And we're tracking who gets the assignments.
And so,
Yes, we have I guess what you would call an assignment person that, we can look at any time of the day and see how many cases this attorney's had, how many have gone to public defender, how many on my docket, how many I've given to the public defender, what the percentages are.
so that should correct any imbalance that was reported as a certain group getting
Right.
the bulk of the heavyweight cases.
Yeah, there's always gonna be a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 3.
Sure, sure.
Because our pool of private attorneys, a lot of them said, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm going downtown.
And in the interest of a wish list, we need more
Yes,
qualified
definitely.
attorneys that are willing to come. I mean, you guys are all here now. Was it convenient? Would it be easy to hear cases downtown and here today? We lose out on a lot of talented people because it's just too hard to practice at both places.
Right.
We need more attorneys and we are trying and
Yeah.
publicizing to law schools, everywhere, internships, everything you can think of. But we do need more attorneys down
We
here.
need more attorneys, and in the same breath, we really don't want, not that I don't want brand new attorneys, but what we're dealing with here at juvenile court is not stealing tennis shoes anymore. The cases, the majority of these cases are serious, high-level cases that have ramifications of being tried as an adult. So I don't want some new lawyer. I'd like to get some of the guys from downtown. And I've even gone to the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association meeting and said, look, I'll set your cases in the afternoon if you'll get on the list.
Problem
I
is
haven't got
though,
anybody on the
some of them can't get on the list because they haven't practiced here in maybe 10 years. So they can't even handle the bind over cases to represent the kid downtown because they don't meet the state public defender's qualifications for reimbursement, where they could be some of the best attorneys that we have in Cuyahoga County, right?
Right.
And maybe were supervisors, vertical prosecutors in the prosecutor's office, had tried SYOs as a prosecutor, handled the docket of homicide cases, yet because it's been more than 10 years since they handled a trial in juvenile court, they can't.
Here's
So
the,
you're saying that somebody could be death penalty qualified, but they couldn't come down here?
Brian
That
Redigan,
is correct.
Tom Shaughnessy.
I have an example for you, Judge. I was watching the news yesterday, or the day before, and there was a young man that was bound over. Judge Russo had him, gave him 16 years, 8 years, and 8 years. It was the case, there's a car accident or something. Kevin Spelcy was representing him in her room, but he couldn't do the bind over down over here because he didn't have the number of
You don't have
hours.
any provision for a waiver with somebody of those kind of
A waiver.
qualifications?
I'm not asking, I don't know.
They do, I actually went down for a bit, I don't know, I see necessarily behalf of the court, but I went down to the state public defender's office meeting over the summer, and we talked about that and the difficulty of the waiver, not the difficulty of the waiver process once it's applied for, but the difficulty in us finding the actual waiver. So we do plan on having in our court seminar next month, telling our assigned counsels and telling the bar that there is a potential opportunity for a waiver. That doesn't necessarily negate the fact that, like Tom said, you know, we're over here 93rd and Quincy, where the Justice Center's down there. When the building opened, I was a practicing lawyer and I had to quickly make the decision, or my law firm made the decision for me, you're gonna either take the divorce cases downtown or be in juvenile court, and guess what? The divorce cases downtown pay the firm a lot more money.
Is the
So
fee schedule
that's-
the same?
It is.
So the fee schedule is the
Pretty
same.
close.
You just can't be in two places at one time. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Right.
but
No,
we
I
work our
understand.
dockets to accommodate them. It's just after all this happened, now it's actually removed some of them from the list.
Yeah, and I've, back to, the even odd, I've not received a call from, Mr. Sweeney, Colin Sweeney, saying that, you know, I'm not getting enough cases or I want more. So,
Well, you don't want all cases with any one entity. You want to have competition and and you have conflict issues.
so many
Yeah,
conflicts,
huge
because
conflicts.
every mom and then abuse neglect dependency case gets public defended. So moms have kids and the conflicts are,
Or
sometimes
they
it takes you a whole day to
represent one of
figure
the
out.
adult co-defendants downtown, like there's a lot.
Okay, so the other issue that was raised in the media had to do with, bindovers.
Mhm.
And how that played out. We've already talked a little bit about the difference between Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland. Is there, and my understanding is that any kind of change as it related to the bindover process necessarily has to be instituted at the state level by the legislature. But in the interim period, given the nature of, what we're seeing and kind of what's been raised, and particularly as it relates to the county prosecutor's role in initiating these things, is there anything that can be done to have more people retained with you?
So the big issue driving the bindovers is the availability of guns. And I have never seen so many kids with so many guns. And I can't figure out where they are getting these firearms. And I don't know, I am completely at a loss about, yes, I'm just kind of speechless. I just don't know. To me, the huge increase in bindovers in the last 4 years has largely been driven by the sheer number of homicide cases. And we aren't talking about stabbings. It's the guns. And I will say that it does seem to be slowly going down or rapidly going down. I guess it depends on what your time frame is. But like right now, today, I think we have 30 kids downstairs who are charged with some form of murder. That's outrageous.
Judge, if I could say something on that.
Yeah,
One of the things that, and like I say, me being with the group, I couldn't say nothing about me being in law enforcement because I knew some things that was worked on. That's why I wanted the FBI to come and
yeah,
speak on it,
right,
because
yeah.
I had spoke on this, like, I'm on a committee with them about 2 years ago. And my question to them was like, well, when I ran the task force, I would have been tracking how the guns are getting here.
Mhm.
Somebody bringing the guns in, they're not coming in off a bird. And so they actually
Right.
had some initiative going, and they have made some significant arrests. And there are some other significant operations going that should assist in diminishing some of the guns that are coming in. 'Cause
And they're not
it
just
wasn't
guns, they're
addressed.
putting switches on them. They're able to put these switches on to turn them into
Right.
semi-automatic
And the
weapons.
bullets,
I mean,
too. Don't forget
yes.
ammunition.
It's,
Don't forget the ammunition.
it is wild, and it is being posted on Instagram Live. The videos that we see sometimes are absolutely horrific. That it's happening in broad daylight on West 25th, it's it's downtown, it's everywhere, right? And it is hanging out of cars, just shooting while driving down the street in the middle of daylight, or robbing people and pointing guns at people at gas stations and ATMs and going into the West Side Market, whatever it is, it's.
And that's actually to sort of close the loop. I do think that's why it would be helpful to talk to law enforcement. Because I don't understand some of what I'm seeing. Like, I just don't understand it. And people who are coming from this at a, different, I would be really interested to have those conversations with the people who are responsible for tracking the flow of the guns and just how are they ending up in the hands of kids? And the other thing I will say is, from this perspective of being on the judge, I can't sit down with the kid one-on-one and say to him, what the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, that would be inappropriate for me to have that, I'm dying to, but I just I can't do it. And so my hope is that if we figure that part out, then some of this insanity that we are seeing will abate. That's
Do
my
the
hope.
gun specifications require bind over? Are they mandatory?
So sometimes, depending on your age, if it's an aggravated robbery and you're 16 or 17 and they can put the gun in your hand,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
it's
a mandatory
mandatory.
bind
If they
over.
can't put the gun in your hand, or if you're younger than 16, then it's discretionary,
And I assume the homicides are all
mandatory.
I mean, you look at that video that was on Cleveland.com, everybody's got a gun. They both have guns, extended clips,
Sometimes they have two. I mean,
assault rifles. I've probably seen, and I'm not making this up, I've seen probably in the last 6 months, 4 young people get killed on video, because there's,
Yeah, I will say
TVs
that.
are
It's
everywhere, cameras are everywhere.
It's
a
a
little
functioning on,
disturbing.
like, if I don't have a gun, I'm not safe, because
Right.
they said they're
Yes.
gonna shoot me, so I need the gun for safety, and so this mentality of like, without a gun, you're not safe, then everybody has it.
Yeah.
It's just
When
trauma.
you're
on top of
13,
trauma.
14, you
Mhm.
don't have the capacity to think about what that means for you long term.
And
Right.
even when I see recidivism in the reentry docket, quite often I don't see another violent offense,
Right.
but a kid is literally in a car with a cousin, somebody else, and then it's having weapons under disability, it's carrying a concealed weapon. But I don't, you're putting a kid again back in the same house where they came from, and in the same neighborhood with people that don't like them, and when they left the community, and I don't know.
And victims are now, after Marcy's law, I mean, it started before that,
Bless
but
you.
victims are always in the courtroom now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is a significant change over the last, like the sex crimes and the gun crimes, the victims or their families are in the courtroom. And that changes the
The dynamic.
dynamic as it
Absolutely.
does. Mhm.
And if people aren't aware of Marcy's law, that law allowed that the victims have a much larger voice
Yeah.
when they do come into your courtroom. You don't always have to let them speak, but they have an absolute right to be there even at the indictment level. And then obviously it's an opportunity for them to voice their position, and you hear more about it every step of the way.
mhm.
So Judge, you brought up the fact that the legislature needs to dictate some of this. As we've asked for more assigned counsel here, I can say that if anybody needs more lawyers, it's the legislature. When I left, it was down to about 11 of us were lawyers. About 4 of us were of a group of 11 were actually practicing lawyers. Back in, even not long before I started, it was in the 80 percentile range. And those unintended consequences that happen as these laws get passed from people that have never been in the courtroom, they just trickle down. So yeah, that's a big portion of it. Obviously, the legislature dictates everything we do. But I think that the makeup of the legislature now, they just don't understand the unintended consequences that happens with this legislation.
Yeah, I think sometimes I wonder if they care,
That's a lot of it too.
looks good, plays well on
Yep.
TV. The last, thing I want to give you an opportunity to, address that appeared in the news had to do with, oversight of private youth centers. And apparently at some point, there was some question as to whether or not the court was exercising enough oversight of the private youth centers.
I can speak to that. This was the Marshall Project who got it, who went in and took a look at the youth care centers, and we had one facility based on that. When the issues were brought to our attention, we immediately addressed them, and we were not satisfied with the response from the executive director and agreed to terminate that contract. I can say today we have one person that is, so this is to your point, Judge. We have, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm answering this question, but.
That's fine. Sit over
There.
We'll allow you to switch
So
hats.
thank you, I'm switching hats right now. So, that was some of the most inaccurate information I've seen that was less than helpful. If you want people to actually contract with the court to take on complex kids with complex trauma and complex family situations, And then you go and try to do a exaggerated gotcha game, on one person sounding off, which was wildly unprofessional. We found out about it. You could have come to us and said, hey, you know, this person's sounding off. We would have addressed it. We did address it. We terminated the contract. That is no longer someone housing our young people. We have one person dedicated to monthly visits. We have a programming and training and quality assurance team that does audits of our community-based organizations, our residential facilities, our group homes. Part of those audits is interviewing staff, it's interviewing youth that are there, it's calling families, it's conducting surveys. There were corrective action plans that each of those agencies did put together, were accountable to and addressed. And they talked about hundreds of complaints. Some of the people that are working in some of these agencies, you know, these are entry level. Some of these are sort of grassroots, small community organizations that are in it trying to do good work and be part of the solution. They said there were hundreds of citations. Those hundreds of citations were, you know, writing the wrong thing on, you know, a log. You know, that's, you know, so we have a person that goes out, and today I just got a report from them last week. You know, they're walking through the facilities and the homes. They're talking to kids, they're checking everything, making sure everything's up to code. Our court takes these issues very seriously. When we're housing young people outside of outside of their parents' home, we take that very seriously. And we do work with agencies to audit them. And we know that one person can do something that, you know, isn't a good look. And we work with agencies to address those issues, and agencies will send us corrective action plans. We'll go back around and we'll meet with those organizations and make sure our kids are safe. Any kid that's placed out of the home that's assigned to a probation officer, which is another reason to keep kids close, is their POs can go right out there. They can walk up at any given time and see how the conditions are. You know, if there's issues, our POs are also walking through facilities, talking to young people, asking how things are going. So I think this is another situation where do folks want to be helpful and be part of the solution? Or do you want to do things that are counter to helping young people? And there are some people that are in the media that I think have done a really nice job of trying to be part of the solution and have elevated some really positive stories. And I think there's some folks in the media who just want the clicks. And I think that was one that was looking for.
And I can say that I can't remember what day it was, but before I was even out of bed, I got a text from Bridget or Tim telling me that this was going on. And my response was, find out who we have there and who's there, I mean, which one of the judges, and notify us. So by the time I got to work, we had a list and we were dealing with it that morning.
And that's a program that we started a number of years ago to deal with domestic violence kids. Because at one point, a quarter of our yearly admissions were for misdemeanor domestic violence.
In the
Now-
detention center.
In the detention
Yeah.
center, thank you, Judge. And now it is maybe 3 or 4 a year, right? Because we can find alternatives to keep misdemeanors away from kids who committed robberies and murders. So, and we need more of that. The judge mentioned shelter care beds. We need more shelter care beds. We need more safe places to put kids that are maybe out of control in the community that we can safely keep a hold of.
Okay, well, that's a positive note for us to kind of bring this to conclusion, unless there's anything anybody else wants to raise. I want to thank you again for giving us.
Thank you.
It's been our pleasure, and as I said, the ultimate goal here is to try to find additional resources and come up with policy suggestions that you can adopt. If we can do those two things, then I feel like I've added one more brick on my road to heaven.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will get that date and we will be in touch.
Let me,
Oh, yes.
before we leave, guys,
Yeah.
I want to do two things. First of all, I think that instead of us trying to schedule additional interviews today, that we'll do that offline, between staff and take a look at the notes and see what other groups we need to talk to. Next, and is there any other miscellaneous business?
That's the big
No, in that case, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any readiness on the motion? Any readiness on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.